October 12, 2023. Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. A Boeing 737-800 sits at Gate B-17. Its engines already warming up for what should be a routine 2-hour flight to Denver. Captain Sarah Chun performs her final checks, unaware that the next 90 minutes will test every skill she's learned in her 18-year career. Weather reports show clear skies ahead, but sometimes the most dangerous flights are the ones that start perfectly normal. This is the story of Horizon Airlines Flight 847, and how a series of cascading failures would turn a simple domestic flight into a fight for survival in the cockpit. Captain Sarah Chun, 45, reviews the flight plan one final time. A former Navy pilot with over 12,000 flight hours, she's known for her methodical approach and calm demeanor under pressure. Beside her, First Officer Marcus Rodriguez, 32, makes his final radio checks. With 6,000 hours of experience, mostly on regional aircraft, this is only his third month flying the 737. Their complementary skills and experience levels create a solid team dynamic. Neither pilot knows that today will demand everything they've learned about aviation, teamwork, and crisis management in ways they never imagined possible. 142 passengers board Flight 847, each carrying their own stories and destinations. Business travelers heading to meetings, families visiting relatives, and tourists eager for Colorado's mountains. Among them is Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a trauma surgeon returning from a medical conference whose skills will soon prove invaluable. The flight attendants complete their safety demonstrations to the usual mixture of attention and indifference from passengers. Everyone expects a routine flight. The aircraft itself, registration N847HZ, is 7 years old with an impeccable maintenance record. Everything appears normal as pushback begins at exactly 2:15 p.m. local time. The 737's engines spool up to full power as it accelerates down runway 8R. Captain Chin pulls back on the yoke at 155 knots, and Flight 847 lifts off smoothly into the clear Arizona sky. The initial climb proceeds normally as they turn northeast toward their cruising altitude of 37,000 feet. Phoenix's sprawling desert landscape falls away below them. Air traffic control vectors them through the busy airspace with routine efficiency. The autopilot engages at 10,000 feet and the crew settles into their cruise checklist. Everything is proceeding exactly as planned. The passengers relax, many already reaching for books, tablets, or settling in for a nap during the short flight ahead. 37 minutes into the flight, cruising peacefully at 37,000 feet, the first warning appears. A subtle amber light illuminates on the engine display, nothing immediately threatening, just an indication that the left engine's oil pressure is slightly below normal parameters. Captain Chen and First Officer Rodriguez exchange glances. It's the kind of minor anomaly that experienced pilots see regularly. The engine continues running normally, all other parameters remain in the green. They decide to monitor the situation closely while continuing toward Denver. According to their training and experience, this type of warning often resolves itself or remains stable throughout the flight. Neither pilot realizes this is the first domino falling. As Flight 847 continues eastward, the weather situation around Denver begins changing rapidly. What started as scattered afternoon thunderstorms is now developing into a significant weather system. Air traffic control begins rerouting aircraft around the growing storm cells. The pilots receive an updated weather report showing deteriorating conditions at Denver International Airport, visibility dropping, wind speeds increasing, and heavy rain now forecast. Captain Chin requests vectors around the weather, but ATC informs them that all available routes are becoming congested with diverted traffic. The simple flight plan is becoming increasingly complex. Fuel consumption calculations become critical as potential delays and rerouting could affect their reserves. The left engine's oil pressure warning, initially just a minor concern, begins showing a downward trend. What started as a slight deviation from normal parameters is now becoming more pronounced. First Officer Rodriguez pulls out the quick reference handbook and begins reviewing procedures for low oil pressure situations. The engine is still running normally, producing full power, but both pilots know that oil pressure issues can escalate quickly. They begin discussing contingency plans, nearest suitable airports, single-engine approach procedures, and emergency checklists. The passengers remain unaware of any issues as the flight continues smoothly from their perspective. However, in the cockpit, the stress level is beginning to increase as multiple challenges compound. As if responding to some cruel twist of fate, the aircraft's primary radio begins experiencing intermittent failures. Communication with air traffic control becomes choppy and unreliable. Captain Chin switches to the backup radio system, but even this creates additional workload during an already complex situation. Clear communication is essential for coordinating around the weather and managing the developing engine issue. The pilots must now carefully manage their radio calls, sometimes repeating transmissions multiple times to ensure ATC receives their messages clearly. This communication challenge adds another layer of complexity to their decision-making process. Every instruction from ATC must be carefully confirmed and acknowledged to prevent misunderstandings. Despite the crew's professional demeanor, some observant passengers begin noticing subtle changes. The flight attendants are making more frequent trips to the cockpit, their usual casual conversations replaced by purposeful movements. Dr. Walsh, seated in 12A, notices the slight vibration in the left engine seems different than when they departed. A few passengers comment on the extended time spent in what appears to be holding patterns. The cabin atmosphere remains generally calm, but there's an underlying current of awareness that something isn't quite routine about this flight. Captain Chin makes a passenger announcement explaining they're deviating around weather, carefully maintaining a calm and professional tone. 55 minutes into the flight, Captain Chin faces a critical decision. The left engine's oil pressure has continued declining, though still within operational limits. Denver's weather is worsening and their fuel situation is becoming a factor due to the extended routing around storms. She calls for the engine failure checklist as a precautionary measure, though the engine hasn't actually failed yet. The crew's training emphasizes being proactive rather than reactive in managing multiple threats. First Officer Rodriguez begins coordinating with air traffic control for priority handling and discussing diversion options. The nearest suitable airport with full emergency services is still 40 minutes away. Time is becoming their enemy. At 62 minutes into the flight, the inevitable happens. The left engine's oil pressure drops catastrophically, followed immediately by rising oil temperature. Captain Chin feels the aircraft yaw slightly to the left as the engine begins losing power. She immediately calls engine failure, left engine, and takes manual control of the aircraft. First Officer Rodriguez begins the engine shutdown checklist as trained. The failed engine's fire warning light illuminates, requiring immediate action. Within 30 seconds, the left engine is shut down and its fire suppression system activated. The Boeing 737 is now a single-engine aircraft carrying 142 passengers and crew through increasingly challenging weather conditions. The situation has escalated from concerning to critical. Flying on one engine dramatically changes everything about Flight 847's capabilities. The aircraft's maximum altitude drops significantly, forcing them to descend from their cruise altitude. Fuel consumption increases as the remaining engine works harder. Most critically, their options for airports become severely limited. They need a runway long enough for single-engine approaches and emergency services standing by. Captain Chen's Navy training kicks in as she manages the aircraft's handling characteristics with asymmetric thrust. The autopilot can still be used, but requires constant monitoring. First Officer Rodriguez coordinates with ATC while managing multiple checklists. Every decision now carries increased weight and consequence for everyone aboard. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Denver Center, Horizon 847, we have an engine failure and are declaring an emergency. Captain Chen's calm, professional voice cuts through the radio static as she formally declares their emergency status. This single transmission sets in motion a complex emergency response involving air traffic control, airport emergency services, airline operations centers, and multiple emergency agencies. Priority handling means other aircraft will be vectored out of their way. Emergency vehicles will be positioned along the runway. The stakes have been raised for everyone involved. ATC immediately begins clearing a path to the nearest suitable airport while coordinating with emergency services on the ground. The time has come to inform the passengers about their situation. Captain Chin takes a deep breath before making one of the most difficult announcements of her career. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've experienced a mechanical issue with one of our engines and have shut it down as a precautionary measure. We're diverting to Albuquerque where emergency services will be standing by. This is purely precautionary. Our aircraft is designed to fly safely on one engine. Her calm delivery helps prevent panic, though tension in the cabin is now palpable. Flight attendants begin preparing passengers for the possibility of an emergency landing while maintaining professional composure. With Albuquerque International Airport now their destination, the crew begins planning their single-engine approach. The approach will be steeper and faster than normal, requiring precise energy management. Captain Chin reviews the runway length and weather conditions. Thankfully, Albuquerque offers multiple long runways and clear weather. First Officer Rodriguez calculates their landing weight and required approach speeds. They'll be landing heavier than normal due to unburned fuel, which affects braking distances and approach characteristics. The crew coordinates with air traffic control for a straight-in approach to minimize maneuvering requirements. Every aspect of the approach must be planned meticulously with no room for error. Senior Flight Attendant Janet Morrison, a 20-year veteran, takes charge of preparing the cabin for emergency landing. Passengers are instructed to review safety cards and brace positions. Those seated near exits receive additional briefing on their responsibilities. Dr. Walsh identifies herself to the crew as a trauma surgeon, offering her services if needed. Carry-on items are secured, seat backs upright, and tray tables stowed. The cabin atmosphere is tense but disciplined. Passengers understand the seriousness while trusting in their crew's professionalism. Children are moved away from exit rows when possible. Every precaution is taken to ensure passenger safety during what could be a challenging landing. 12 miles from Albuquerque's runway 8, Flight 847 begins its final approach. Emergency vehicles line the runway, fire trucks, ambulances, and rescue equipment stand ready. Captain Chin flies the approach manually, feeling every input required to keep the aircraft aligned with asymmetric thrust. The single engine works harder, temperatures carefully monitored. First Officer Rodriguez calls out altitude and airspeed deviations as they descend through the clear New Mexico sky. The approach is stable but requires constant attention and control inputs. Air traffic control has cleared all other traffic from the area, giving Flight 847 absolute priority. The runway grows larger in the windscreen as they continue their descent. Single-engine landings require precise technique and timing. Captain Chin must account for the aircraft's tendency to yaw toward the dead engine while managing approach speed carefully. Too fast risks overrunning the runway, too slow risks losing control. The crosswind, though light, adds another variable to manage. At 500 feet above ground, the approach is stabilized and on target. First Officer Rodriguez continues monitoring engine parameters and calling out critical information. The landing gear is down and locked, flaps set for landing configuration. Emergency vehicles follow their progress, ready to respond instantly if needed. The next 60 seconds will determine the outcome of Flight 847's emergency. Captain Chin flares the aircraft perfectly, touching down smoothly on Albuquerque's runway 8. The moment the wheels contact the runway, she deploys spoilers and applies maximum braking while maintaining directional control. The aircraft decelerates rapidly but remains stable on the centerline. Emergency vehicles pursue alongside as the 737 slows. First Officer Rodriguez monitors systems and prepares for potential evacuation commands. The aircraft comes to a complete stop well within the runway's confines, 2,800 feet from touchdown point. For the first time in over an hour, both pilots allow themselves a moment of relief. The most critical phase is complete, but their responsibilities continue until every passenger is safely off the aircraft. With the aircraft safely stopped, Captain Chen's first priority is passenger safety. Fire crews immediately inspect the shutdown engine for any signs of fire or fluid leaks while the crew performs post-landing checklists. The cabin remains pressurized and comfortable while they coordinate with ground services. Air traffic control coordinates with airline operations to arrange passenger accommodations and alternate transportation. First Officer Rodriguez communicates with company dispatch while Captain Chin addresses passengers again, explaining the situation and next steps. The professionalism and training of everyone involved has prevented what could have been a catastrophic situation from becoming anything more than an inconvenient delay for most passengers. After careful consultation with emergency services and maintenance personnel, Captain Chin makes the decision that a full emergency evacuation is not necessary. The aircraft is stable, there are no fire indications, and emergency crews have given the all-clear. Passengers will deplane normally through the jet bridge once it's positioned. This decision prioritizes passenger safety while avoiding the trauma and potential injuries associated with emergency slide evacuations. Flight attendants prepare for normal deplaning procedures while emergency services remain on standby. The passengers who had prepared for the worst feel relief wash over them as they realize their ordeal is essentially over. Professional execution has transformed a potential disaster into a successful emergency landing. News of Flight 847's emergency landing spreads quickly through aviation and general media channels. The successful outcome, with no injuries and professional crew performance, becomes a positive story highlighting aviation safety systems and crew training effectiveness. Captain Chen and First Officer Rodriguez, though exhausted, briefly speak with investigators who begin the process of determining the exact cause of the engine failure. The airline's crisis management team coordinates passenger care and rebooking while managing media inquiries. Dr. Walsh, whose medical expertise fortunately wasn't needed, praises the crew's calm professionalism to reporters. The incident becomes a textbook example of successful emergency management in aviation. Federal Aviation Administration and National Transportation Safety Board investigators arrive at Albuquerque International Airport within hours of the landing. The failed engine is carefully inspected and photographed before being removed for detailed analysis. Preliminary examination suggests a bearing failure led to the oil pressure loss and subsequent engine shutdown. Flight data recorders and cockpit voice recorders are downloaded for analysis. The aircraft's maintenance records are reviewed to identify any potential contributing factors. Captain Chin and First Officer Rodriguez provide detailed statements about the sequence of events. The investigation will take months to complete, but initial findings suggest proper crew response to a mechanical failure. Among the 142 passengers aboard Flight 847, each person processed the emergency differently. Business executive Tom Morrison, initially frustrated by the delay, found himself appreciating the crew's skill and professionalism. College student Sarah Kim documented the experience on social media, praising the captain's calm communication throughout the crisis. Elderly couple Robert and Martha Stevens, initially frightened, were comforted by flight attendants' care and attention. Dr. Walsh reflected on how her medical training prepared her to help others while also appreciating the aviation professionals who made her assistance unnecessary. These individual stories highlight the human element in aviation safety and the importance of crew training in managing passenger psychology during emergencies. The Boeing 737-800's design philosophy emphasizes redundancy and single-engine operational capability, features that proved crucial during Flight 847's emergency. The aircraft's fly-by-wire systems provided stability assistance while Captain Chin maintained manual control during the approach. Engine manufacturers designed their products to fail safely, containing damage and allowing controlled shutdown when problems occur. The crew's decision-making process followed established protocols while adapting to specific circumstances. Aviation safety experts later praised the systematic approach to threat management demonstrated throughout the flight. The incident reinforces the effectiveness of current training programs and aircraft design standards in protecting passengers during emergencies. Flight 847's successful outcome validates decades of aviation training evolution and safety culture development. Captain Chen's initial Navy training, combined with ongoing commercial aviation proficiency requirements, provided the foundation for her performance under pressure. First Officer Rodriguez's systematic checklist usage and crew resource management skills contributed significantly to the positive outcome. Simulator training scenarios, often criticized by pilots as unrealistic, proved their value in preparing crews for multiple simultaneous challenges. The incident becomes a case study used in aviation training programs worldwide, demonstrating how proper preparation and execution can overcome significant operational challenges. The successful handling of Flight 847's emergency resonates throughout the aviation industry, reinforcing confidence in current safety systems and training protocols. Airlines review their own emergency procedures and crew training programs, looking for ways to incorporate lessons learned from this incident. Aircraft manufacturers examine engine failure modes and crew interface designs for potential improvements. Air traffic control facilities analyze their emergency handling procedures and coordination with airline operations centers. The incident contributes to ongoing improvements in aviation safety culture, where successful emergency management is studied as intensively as accidents for continuous improvement opportunities. 6 months after Flight 847's emergency landing, the investigation concludes with findings that lead to improved engine inspection procedures and crew training updates. Captain Chin receives recognition for her professional handling of the emergency but emphasizes that the success resulted from team effort and systematic training. First Officer Rodriguez's performance leads to his upgrade to captain ahead of schedule. The aircraft, after engine replacement and thorough inspection, returns to service with an enhanced maintenance monitoring program. Dr. Walsh maintains contact with the crew, developing friendships forged during their shared experience. The passengers, initially united by crisis, gradually return to their normal lives with increased appreciation for aviation safety. Flight 847's story illustrates fundamental principles of aviation safety: systematic training, crew resource management, aircraft design redundancy, and emergency response coordination. The incident demonstrates how multiple small problems can compound into serious situations requiring proactive management rather than reactive responses. Communication challenges during emergencies highlight the importance of backup systems and clear protocols. Passenger management during crises requires balancing honesty with reassurance to prevent panic while maintaining trust. The aviation industry's commitment to learning from every incident, whether accident or successful emergency handling, continues driving safety improvements that benefit all travelers. As the sun sets over Albuquerque International Airport on October 12, 2023, Flight 847 sits quietly at the gate, its passengers safely on their way to final destinations aboard other aircraft. The story of this flight exemplifies aviation at its best: professional crews, well-designed aircraft, comprehensive training, and systematic emergency response working together to protect human life. Captain Sarah Chin and First Officer Marcus Rodriguez returned to their hotel exhausted but proud of their performance under pressure. Their experience joins countless other aviation success stories that rarely make headlines but demonstrate daily the effectiveness of modern aviation safety culture. Every safe flight represents victory over the challenges of powered flight in an unforgiving environment.